emergency powers should not be normalized because they are a threat, of course, to normal democratic governance, right? Joining me now, journalist for Rebel News up in Canada, Adam Soos. Adam, thanks for being with us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So was this a bit of a shock to the Canadian people when Trudeau actually went through with this? My understanding is first time they've ever invoked this specific Canadian statute. Were people surprised, or was this really expected?
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, they say this is the first time that this statute particularly has been brought into effect. But the reality is this is the new version of the War Measures Act, which has been basically brought into play a couple times throughout history, World War I, World War II. And then when we had the liberation crisis with separatists in Quebec who had kidnapped and effectively murdered, an extremely serious situation. So the last time that was implemented, and in that instance, there was massive overreach, overstep, and it wasn't just stopping that threat in Quebec. It was significant action and arrests of political opponents. Well, you can guess who did that. It was Trudeau, not Justin, but his dad, Pierre Elliott. So we are looking very much at a nepotism in a level that you'd see in some of these third world countries or communist countries, where there's a sort of legacy of tyranny. Now, we've had some arguably fairly elected representatives in between that window, but you're looking at the nepotism of sorts within the Trudeau family. And the last time that these measures were brought into effect, though they were under a different name, was in fact his dad. I don't think Canadians were shocked or surprised. The rhetoric that Justin Trudeau has been using, the language he's been using, the vilification of these people from the very get-go has been pretty transparently utilized to set this up and justify this sort of action. The fact of the matter is, though, even mainstream media is starting to shift to at least some extent on this. 5 provinces opposed the implementation of this Emergencies Act. And as you can see, some civil liberties organizations are at least starting to say, no, this is too much. For those who aren't necessarily aware, effectively the bridge at Windsor, the Ambassador Bridge, has been cleared. The Coutts blockade is rolling out presently, and most provinces are starting to revoke restrictions and mandates in pretty significant ways. So for everyone observing this objectively, the truckers made their point, the provinces, the federal opposition, everyone is saying it's time to move on, we have to get past this. And in response to this, Justin Trudeau invokes dramatic legislation, giving them extremely problematic powers at this time.
Trudeau is claiming, Adam, I mean, this is remarkable to see the positions this guy has taken over the course of this. He's trying to say that there's really no issue over the vaccine mandate program, that's not dividing Canadians. Watch this.
High vaccination rates and strong public health measures are still seeing backlashes against those measures and frustration by people who are tired of this pandemic. And the impact of social media and illicit funding of concerted activities designed to destabilize a country that has the highest vaccination rate of many of our peer countries, Canada, around an issue that is not dividing Canadians. Canadians are united in having been there for each other through this pandemic, and they're even united in being sick and tired of this pandemic.
Seems like he's a little, disconnected, perhaps delusional? I mean, why are so many people supporting the truckers if there's nothing to be divided about?
And I think the term we could use here is he's a little bit sociopathic. He's an individual who cannot admit fault in any circumstance whatsoever. When there was allegations of sexual assault, he said that the person must have clearly misremembered it. When he wore blackface, he didn't say sorry in those blatant terms. He said, this is a learning opportunity for all of us. And when the nation is more divided than ever, so divided that he thinks he needs to implement the Emergencies Act, he suggests that the nation is not at all divided because Justin Trudeau is all about sunny ways and he wouldn't divide people. But when we look out on the streets, he's saying these people are villains. He's saying they're violent. He's miscategorizing and vilifying them. Even liberal Bill Maher is saying that some of his rhetoric, and I'm using his words, is very reminiscent of some of the things Hitler said. That's a liberal American pundit saying that. It's not a staunch conservative or a member of the truck convoy. That's a member of the liberal media suggesting that some of his rhetoric is so problematic. And even in that, he's saying that there's no division whatsoever. I was covering this story. I was with these protesters. I can assure you, I was incredibly comfortable leaving expensive camera gear, leaving my vehicle unlocked. You never went hungry. People were feeding everybody, taking care of each other. It was the least violent thing you could imagine. Even when they rolled out of Coots at the blockade there, they shook hands, hugged the police, said we've made our point, and at least the mandates, at least the restriction portion with the vaccine mandates is over. But the fact of the matter is here, like Justin Trudeau said there, most of these people who are protesting are not protesting against vaccines. They aren't anti-vax. What they are is anti-coercion. They're pro-free medical choice. So what they're opposing is the fact that thousands of people, after years and years of loyal service, have been fired on the spot, received no severance, and are basically left in ruins. They're protesting medical coercion, and they're protesting having to be vaccinated to participate in society. That's a pretty sensible opinion. And that's why we're seeing the general population, people who have gone along with this, perhaps the majority, starting to shift and stand with the truckers instead of these politicians.
Deputy Prime Minister is certainly not standing with the truckers, Adams. I'm sure you know. This statement came out from the Deputy Prime Minister. Consider yourselves warned. If your truck is used in these blockades, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. Send your rigs home. Kind of like financial warfare being waged by the state here against these individuals involved in, as you pointed out, peaceful and safe protest.
You can find our deputy minister there, by the way, on the board members list for the World Economic Forum, for those interested in those types of things. So she's doing that while serving as deputy minister. So very interesting indeed. The extent of the economic warfare being waged here, though, is more problematic than you could possibly imagine. What they've done under this Emergencies Act is effectively given carte blanche to financial institutions to shutter accounts entirely, to freeze accounts, lock them out. They've also implemented new measures which effectively insist that any of these crowdfunding campaigns, which have largely been frozen, must report all their issues to basically a financial tracking organization, FinTrack, which is a Canadian intelligence agency that tracks this sort of thing. So the overreach is troubling. They've also implemented measures where they can commandeer tow trucks, because to be blunt, the tow truck companies that they asked to move these truckers simply weren't doing it. A number issued public statements saying we're not doing this. So not only did they mandate that they can actually seize those trucks, commandeer those vehicles, they have actually also mandated that they can force tow truck drivers to drive those trucks and clear trucks as needed. They're effectively commandeering human beings for their purposes, which is startling. So there's personal attacks, there's economic warfare here, and very much a large percentage of what is going on here is directed at targeting people who have provided either ideological or financial support. There was loose sort of associations that anyone, let's say a grandma gave $25, $50 to the GoFundMe or the Give Send Go to support these truckers. They used the language of supporting terrorism for these peaceful protests.
I want to ask you, Adam, because you're so close in on these issues. The police chief of Ottawa has resigned, Peter Slally. I'm not sure if that's how you say his name, but did he resign? Why? Because he didn't want to enforce Trudeau's elevated police actions against the truckers? Is he kind of pro-trucker, and what's the situation?
Yeah,
why did he resign?
So I mean, I think on the broader scale, it is clearly that I think people in Ottawa, well, by people in Ottawa, I mean Laurentian elite liberal politicians, wanted this to be absolutely hammered down. And this is a brand new story, even for us here. We're just getting this information, but it seems very likely that he did not enact the level of force that politicians from Justin Trudeau all the way down might have liked to clear off the streets. Beyond that, and there's a question of to what extent this is true. There was some talk that he had spoken perhaps inappropriately to some other senior officers. So they're saying both of those things. Now, which one of those factored in more prominently? Guessing, and this is not a confirmed report, but I'd suggest the fact that the situation extended and Justin Trudeau is unhappy about it factored in more than him speaking less than kindly to some senior officers.
All right, Adam, great reporting as always, man. Come back and tell us how this thing finishes out.
Will do. Thanks so much for having me.